Good afternoon, Paul.
Good afternoon, Ajahn.
So today is Sunday, June the 7th. And thank you again for taking a few questions for this video. So the first question today is just with the background of what everybody's reading in the news these days with all these protests going on. You have any reflections around that, Paul?
Well, it's, the situation of the planet. There's so many kind of frightening conditions that are broadcasted through the media, through the internet. And this is worldwide, so the reaction is not just confined to one specific area or one country or even one continent. But the protests that are taking place, have become international. About an incident that took place in Minnesota, in the United States, and people wonder why would people in European countries or other areas be that concerned. But this is an interesting time where the mass media is bringing together the population of the world. We're no longer seeing each other as totally separate countries in the way that we did before. Nationalism is very specific, my nation, and you define yourself according to your nationality, your race, your gender. All these are identities that are programmed into us. They're not natural phenomena. You're not born with a sense of nationality or race or gender, but these perceptions, these concepts, are given to us when we're growing up. That you are a girl, a boy, black or white, American or Brazilian or whatever, and then you're conditioned to see things through the particular conditions of the time. Like I grew up during the Second World War, where the whole aim was very righteous war in terms of the American attitude, and the propaganda was very kind of exaggerating the importance and righteousness of the American dream. And so that's part of the conditioning from early childhood through teenage, oftentimes unquestioned, and merely the way we tend to explain and interpret experience in life. So with racism or something like that is a condition that's acquired. It's not natural. It's not something that is part of the natural flow of life. It's conditioned perceptions that one race is better or superior to another race. This is not the way things really are, but this is the way that various people have been conditioned to perceive in terms of good, better, best, bad, worse, worse. Because in Buddha Dhamma, the conditioned realm is about differences. It's about, that all sankharas are impermanent, sankharas change, they're never the same. And then the Buddha points out the body is a sankhara, so there's no equality among bodies because we all have different forms, different sizes, different shapes, colors, genders, and these are changing conditions, and they're phenomena, and their very nature is to change. So what is superior about any condition is just an imagined that we hold to. We cling to an idea of someone being superior to another. And so in terms of reflection, we begin to see through the delusions we create around the way we've been conditioned. So that you're not trying to just adopt a new set of conditions called Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism, that in exchange and can try to get rid of the old conditioning. But the old conditioning, the way we operate as an ego, as a separate entity, as a personality, as a man or woman, is something that we've been conditioned with since early childhood. So it's not that it's right or wrong. Some conditioning is better than others, but it's still conditioning, it's still conceptualizing, it's still holding to sankharas as our reality, where with meditation you're seeing that sankharas are not real, that they're not what they seem or what we believe they are. Like the United States was founded on ideals. It's a very idealistic society founded on the Constitution, equality, freedom, democracy, all the highest possible concepts that a human individual can possibly create with their intellect. Human rights and freedom and equality are beautiful ideals and concepts. So that is the kind of karma of the United States is based on very high-minded ideals, but in reality, the actual economy at the time of independence was the economy depended on slavery, and human beings could own other human beings as property, and that was not questioned at the time of the American independence. So, the problems of American society to this day is that the conflict between the ideals that were established through the Constitution and the karmic conditions that actually existed in the society at the time were not really, have only fairly recently, since the Civil War, has there been recognition, a kind of determination to give equal rights to everybody, every citizen in America. And this is it's been since the Civil War, really, that this has become made fully conscious and judged according to right and wrong, good or bad. So a lot of the cultural conditioning still is based on the old idea of a slave economy or one race superior to another, and that conditioning still operates. So people take sides, make enemies of what they see as wrong or inferior or not as good as. And these are habits that, if we're not reflective, if we're not aware, we don't see in terms of what they really are. We operate from prejudiced, biased conditions, our own nationalistic views, our own way the women feel about their position in the society, and how men feel that their position in the society are usually not reflected upon in terms of reality or in terms of the way things are, but in terms of the cultural conditioning or conditioning we receive later on when we wake up to the society. There's a lot of inequality and unfairness, injustice, but some people don't reflect like that. They feel, have the idea that power is the way to control everything and to dominate people, and make them righteous, convert them to one religion, the righteous and the only right religion, is, a cultural bias. It's a biased attitude that is easily believed in because it's based on what we believe is right. And right then, the clinging to righteousness creates an enemy with what we perceive as wrong, or not the same as, or unequal. Where with wisdom, we see that in terms of equality, all conditions have the same characteristics. Whether it's physical, mental, emotional, perceptual, sensual, whether it's nationalism or internationalism or globalism, liberal or conservative, our views about femininity, masculinity, we have certain righteous views coming from ideals we have of what should be and what shouldn't be. And these righteous views, because they tend to come from what we feel is right, then automatically one that doesn't fit into our particular boundaries of righteousness is considered wrong. And as we are aware, we begin to see that we create enemies, we create problems through our own attachments to our own religion, to our own tradition, to our own way of thinking. So even liberal-minded people can see that conservatives are the enemy, or conservatives can see the liberals as enemies because of this clinging to a particular viewpoint. And the point of the Buddhist teaching is to wake up to this, to see that this is really not the way things are. This is the way we tend to believe. And beliefs are, they're not realistic. They're given to us. You might believe in God, or then another person believes there isn't any God. There's both beliefs, whether you're a theist or an atheist, because you aren't aware that if you believe in God, that you haven't really considered what is God in reality. If God is real, then it's something to recognize, that you can recognize or realize through experience, where to believe there isn't any God is the same thing. You take a position, so your whole way of interpreting experience is atheistic. Where in mindfulness practices, awarenesses of our particular cultural biases, positions we take, our own sense of righteousness, just observe your own sense of superiority to somebody else, or your sense of inferiority, or even the sense that we're all equal. It's a creation that we adopt. It's not the way things are. All conditions are not equal. They're all, because conditions, phenomena, it's about all differences, the sizes, shapes, forms, colors, and they're not blue is not equal to red, or yellow is not equal to green. But in terms of equality is reality itself. So, and the Buddha is pointing to equality. What is reality itself is awareness, consciousness. Because the consciousness of a man, a woman, African American or white person, Christian, Buddhist, Islam, whatever, the common, where we're all equal in creation itself is in consciousness. Because consciousness isn't about choosing, that there's separate kind of condition unique to individual bodies, but it's ultimate reality. And so mindfulness is awakening to this ultimate ultimate reality, which gives us perspective on, when you see the oneness, the perfection of reality itself, then how can you hate anybody or, be jealous or guilt-ridden or arrogant if you operate from where equality really exists. But when we operate from our positions, our conditioned perceptions of equality, then it remains an ideal. And then we feel frustrated because things don't, it doesn't seem that, that we can make everything equal as an ideal, because that's impossible. Where awakening to Dhamma is recognizing equality is our true nature. And what we think we are is all about unequalness, differences, changing conditions. Some conditions are good, some conditions are not good, but we're not aligning ourselves with this dualistic structure of thought and perception, but taking our stand, making ourselves recognize, awaken to the perfection of Dhamma, of reality itself.
You speak of mindfulness as the way to realize that. Sometimes we use this Pali word, sati sampajanya, to speak about mindfulness. Can you speak about that? In particular, sampajanya, what is it and how does one cultivate that?
Sati is translated as awareness, and it's, here and now, because, you're aware now. Whatever you're doing or not doing, you're aware, it's like this. Then sampajanya is, and that's more, awareness is more or less, just awakening to the present moment. It's like this. And then if we're not aware, if we're aware, but we're not using sampajanya, we're not using intuition, then we operate from our conditioned biases, like this is right, this is wrong, this is good, bad, true, false. So that just operating on awareness and being conscious, we tend to perpetuate the conditioning, reinforce the karma conditioning, because karma really means cause and effect conditioning, and operating from biases, prejudices, nationalistic views, and so forth, that are just habitual patterns that repeat themselves until we use sampajanya, which is, I translate it as intuition, or intuitive awareness, because just the intellectual perceptions are from the brain, like the human brain is, considered the seat of consciousness by many people, by many scientists, psychologists. But the brain is more like a computer, it's programmed. As I've been previously talking about, the programming, cultural programming, nationalistic programming, personal programming we get from after we're born, that's about what good little girls are and bad little girls. It's about who, right and wrong, what's good behavior, it's about morality, it's about ethics, it's about social values, so on that level, the social values differ from one society to another. What is considered refined in Thailand is not considered important in other places. So this is cultural conditioning. But sampajanya as intuition is more on the heart level, then it's not from the head, the judging conditions, nothing judging situations in terms of right and wrong, good or bad, but being aware it's like this, So intuition is awareness that includes everything. It's not judgmental. It's not about right and wrong anymore. It's not about how things should or shouldn't be, but it's the way it is. It's like this. So it's when we use sampajanya in our lives, we begin to, we stop criticizing. We see the suffering we create through just attachment to views of right and wrong, good and bad. And as we let go, then we see we have this intuition that our views, our particular righteous positions, our cultural conditioning, all conditioned phenomena is impermanent and not self, is really not what one is. So wisdom comes from sampajanya, sati sampajanya together. They bring us to the reality of here and now, the timeless reality that we're experiencing all the time, because life is nothing but the experience of here and now. You're not going to experience tomorrow now. You're experiencing existence now. You're experiencing consciousness now, and here and now. So it's not about the place, but the fact that here is wherever one is, and now is the way it is right now, not perceiving tomorrow or the past. So it's establishing this standard, this natural wisdom that is available to all of us. That is not something that is impossible or you can't do, but it's just awakening to the reality of things that through sampajanya we began to have the insights, not just intellectual positions about equality or freedom or democracy, but we understand what all our conditioned activities are, and when we're not judging them, we've established ourselves in sila, to do good, refrain from doing bad. So in that, it's training oneself with the 5 precepts, the 8 precepts, the 227 rules of the Buddhist monk, is establishing a kind of foundation or vehicle for insight, for ultimate liberation and freedom, because doing good brings happiness, and doing bad doesn't bring happiness. Doesn't bring a sense of self-respect or being at ease with yourself as an individual. You tend to find yourself, being critical of yourself and feeling threatened, a lot of fear through immoral, improper actions, through physical activity or speech. So, the very foundation of sati sampajanya is sila. Dana sila, dana in Buddhist terms is generosity. So, we're not just thinking of ourselves, of what I can get out of this, but we're also generous. We share what we have, what we're able to share with others, is developing a foundation with dana and sila, generosity and morality. There's a foundation for this insight into ultimate freedom, true happiness, and it's through Sati Sampajanya, you can't do it just through the intellect, just through idealizing or, holding to ideals of what should be, because ideals themselves are conditions, they're not ultimate reality.
Someone asked if you could say something about right speech, please.
Yes, right speech. It's an interesting time because when I was a graduate student at University of California in 1962, 63, they had the freedom of speech movement. And I remember that, the protests at the university to be able to use any speech, to say anything you think, or use four-letter words in public, because it's freedom of speech. And so there was this in the freedom of speech is another ideal. And what do you mean by freedom of speech? This is a question now of public addressing to political correctness. It seems to be, a contrast to the idea of freedom of speech, because if you take freedom of speech to its ultimate, you can say anything you happen to be thinking in the moment, whether it makes sense or it's nonsense or true or false, whether it's useful or harmful. It's my right to say what I think in public is taking the perception of freedom of speech to absurdity. It's absurd because, there's such a thing as right speech rather than freedom of speech. And I've often thought, being a monk for so many years, of the joy I find in all the things I never said, but had thought during these years as a Buddhist monk. Because you're aware, some people have no control over their speech, where they think whatever arises in their mind and just blurt it out. With political correctness, we're trying to not use speech to offend people. So that's one check on it, on this idea of I can say anything I want. But remember, freedom of speech is an ideal that is created by human beings. And do we really want freedom of speech, everybody to just blurt out whatever they're thinking in the moment? Is that going to bring harmony or peace, or does that enhance the experience? Or is it just going to be an endless cacophony of views and opinions and reactions to conditions of the moment, without any reflection or control or responsibility? So freedom of speech as an ideal, then political correctness is an attempt to try to avoid saying things that are going to offend or sound, mean or aggressive towards others in public. But also it can go to absurdity, as we see in many cases, where you can't say something is what it is because you might offend somebody if you actually said it like that. So you use euphemisms or speak around things. Is not sampajanya. It's not like intuitive awareness. It's just manipulating your mind to what you perceive, what you project on the people around you, or onto yourself. Where freedom of speech, to put it back in the context of what is an ideal, speech is something that we develop after we're born. We're not born speaking any language. And so then so we have different conditions, different attitudes, different prejudices, or social or cultural national biases, and that we're conditioned with, that we speak from. So, in religious parlance, isn't it? We speak from a particular religious position, or from an atheistic position, or a scientific position, or personal. We can see everything as, I have my own positions, my personal positions. But positions are always, conditions. They're impermanent. They rise and cease, and and awareness allows us to see that any position we're attached to is going to, eventually unsatisfactory. That just being able to say whatever we're thinking, is that freedom? Does that make you free, or does it create more enmity or confusion, or problems for yourself and the people you live with and the society you're in? And it's sampajanya, the intuitive awareness, that develops this sense of what is appropriate to say, what is right to say at this time, what is needed to be said, to be vocalized, to be communicated to others at this moment. Then that is right speech.
Thank you. One last question was someone asking how to use the reflection on the three characteristics of unsatisfactoriness, change, and non-self in daily life.
Yes, the Buddha wisdom gave what's common, three characteristics common to all conditions, all sankharas, all phenomena. So in this way, all conditions are equal through their characteristics. All conditions are impermanent, they're unsatisfactory, and they're non-personal, they're not self. So these, in Pali terms, you have anicca, dukkha, anatta, translated as anicca is impermanent, dukkha is considering as unsatisfactory or suffering, and anatta is not personal, not an ego. It's not that conditioned phenomena we take personally, out of ignorance, out of lack of wisdom, out of just social, cultural conditioning. We operate from personal identities all the time, personal positions, personal biases, personal prejudices that we attach to, but all those are not personal. We create the sense of personal identity with what we're attached to. So I found this reflection very, it's kind of brilliant way of looking at phenomena, because you're not just judging phenomena, according to right and wrong, which we tend to do with our intellect. What is good, what is bad, what is acceptable, what is unacceptable. That's the intellect operating, that's the ego. The ego is based on right and wrong, good and bad, true and false. So but the ego, is conditioned. You're not born with an ego. A newborn baby doesn't have an ego. It has a form, it has a human form, and it's conscious. And it has instinctual survival mechanisms for communication. But it doesn't think of itself as a personality, as a boy or girl or black or white, and as Thai or American, it doesn't. That's conditioned into us later on, after we're born. Where consciousness is natural, isn't it? Because it was not created. The baby doesn't create consciousness when it's born. It's born conscious. If it's not conscious, then it's stillborn. The body is born, but the consciousness is not operating through the form anymore. So, anicca dukkha anatta, or impermanence, just reflect on, your own experience of life, and what you see, hear, smell, taste, touch, think, feel, emotions, your beliefs, your prejudices, your loves and hates. They're not, they come and go, they change according to conditions. One of the common requests is, how do I get rid of anger? Like the idea that if you're really enlightened, you don't feel anger, you don't get angry. And on retreats, one of the most common questions retreatants have is, how do I get rid of anger? And so anger is part of the package of being born in a mammalian form, in an animal's form. It's common to all creatures, mammalian creatures, because it's, there's a lot to, when you identify only in terms of instinct and survival and form, then there is a lot to be angry about, because life isn't going to bend, to protect you as an individual ego for a lifetime. That there are going to be times where anger arises, greed arises, lust arises, confusion, resentment, jealousy, fear. These are all part of what we call the samsara, the cycles of samsara, or the cycles of conditioned phenomena, which are all impermanent. So when we reflect on what we see, like the eyes that we see with are impermanent. When the body's dead, the eyes decay. They have no kind of consciousness of their own, but consciousness can operate through seeing, through hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, and but once the body has died, then consciousness doesn't operate. The sense organs decay, so they're impermanent. Yet we strongly identify personally with sight, with sound, with smell. We have strong views of, what is taste, what is delicious, what isn't, what's harmonious and beautiful in terms of sound, and what is cacophonous, what is ugly, what is beautiful. These are all determined through conditioning, through the intellect, through comparing one thing with another. But in mindfulness practices, meditation, we're observing that everything we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, think, the bodies that we identify with, they're all impermanent. That's their nature, is to change. Once you're born, you just grow old. You can't get younger than a newborn baby, but you can get older. So once it's born, it can only grow old until, whatever age is the end of your life, which could be any time. The movement of birth is towards death. So, there's a joke amongst Buddhist monks that we're all born with a terminal illness, which is birth, isn't it? It's because once you're born, you're going to die. And so that's a fact. Nobody's going to refute that. But oftentimes we live our life as if we're not going to die. And But death is the nature of what begins must end. What is born must die. This is the characteristic of impermanence that's common to all conditions, whether they're big or small, right or wrong, whatever, male or female, freedom or slavery or whatever. They're all conditions that are changing and are impermanent. They're all, if we attach to impermanence, then we suffer because, they're unsatisfying. Even if you become the richest person in the whole world with everything you've ever wanted available at every moment of your life, there's still, you've got to deal with fear and safety and protection and hoarding and identity with wealth. And when you're wealthy, other people, are jealous or want to take what you have. So, it creates more fear and anxiety and paranoia. So even trying to get the best of life itself through the senses, through what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and think, is only going to lead towards dukkha, or feeling of being unsatisfied, a sense of lack, or something's missing, because this binding ourselves to conditions limits us to that condition, which is in itself going to change. And so, you find yourself at peak moments where everything is perfect in your life, so you think, I've got everything I want, I'm at my best, I'm successful, I have a good income, a good partner, everything is wonderful. That's like a peak moment, but you can't sustain that. You can't sustain a peak moment. Because that's a peak, and so it's going to change, go the other way, which is toward, the changes we don't want when we're grasping what we consider as perfect here and now. And then anatta, non-self, is, a real liberation to be free from identifying yourself with phenomena, with conditions, identifying yourself with impermanence and suffering, to see yourself always in these limitations of your physical form, of your intellect, of your social position, of your status, of your, in terms of whether you're considered successful or failure, whether you're prosperous or poverty-stricken. To always identify with these positions is suffering. It's impermanent, and it's not a self. It's just an imagined self when we identify with poverty, with success, with prosperity, with political preferences, with gender, with nationality, and so the reflective ability in Buddha Dhamma practice is to see, we've given these three characteristics to reflect upon again and again, so that, because we need to remind ourselves, because the default position is usually to revert back to conditioned habits, because that's what we're used to. So, when we're poor, we identify with poverty, and then we create this sense of we're not as good as somebody who's rich, or it's not fair. We begin to envy the rich and want to get what they have. So it creates endless problems, personal problems, social problems, because we identify with our position in the society, with what we have or don't have. But when we see that whatever we're thinking, whatever we're feeling present moment here and now is anicca, it's impermanent, it's dukkha, it's unsatisfactory, and it's anatta, it's not personal, it's not self.